sun was merciless that day. Its burning heat pressed down on the desert floor until the earth itself seemed to groan. And there, in the middle of that empty stretch of dust and rock, a young woman lay bound, her wrists tied tight to iron stakes hammered deep into the ground, her ankles lashed so hard the rope bit into her skin. She was stretched out like prey offered to the sun. Her dress was torn, her lips cracked and bleeding, and her hair stuck to her face with sweat. Every breath was shallow, every movement a struggle. The crowd of villagers stood back in silence, their eyes fixed on her. Some looked away, too ashamed. Others stared with cold satisfaction, as if her suffering gave meaning to their own fear. At the front of them all stood Silas Boone, the village head, a man with eyes as sharp as a hawk and a voice that carried the weight of authority. His hand rested on the handle of his whip, though he did not need to use it. The ropes in the sun were punishment enough. Boone's voice broke the silence. "This is the way of our fathers," he declared, pointing at the girl. "If she survives 3 days under the gaze of the heavens, she walks free. If she dies, her guilt is proven. That is our law." No one dared to challenge him. The villagers nodded slowly, some muttering prayers, others spitting into the dirt as if to seal the ritual. The girl's name was Abigail Dawson, only 23 years old. She had been accused of stealing from the very people who now condemned her. Gold had gone missing from the stores of the village, and Boone had named her the thief. She denied it with every ounce of her being, but her words carried no weight against his authority. Now she lay there, bound and helpless, her skin burning under the pitiless sun. Her voice cracked as she tried to call out, "Please, I beg you, I did nothing. Please." But the desert wind carried her plea away, and the people only stared. Children clutched their mothers. Old men crossed their arms, not one step forward. For them, this was not cruelty. This was justice. This was tradition. Generations had obeyed this law of fire and sand, and to question it was to stand against the village itself. And so they turned their backs and walked away, leaving her to face the judgment of the sky alone. The sun climbed higher. The ground beneath Abigail scorched her skin. Her eyes fluttered open and closed as if even the act of seeing was too heavy. Hours passed. The world narrowed to the pounding of her heart and the sound of flies buzzing over the cracked soil. She could taste blood on her lips. Her voice had grown too weak for cries. It was only a whisper now, a whisper swallowed by the desert. Still, in that moment of despair, a single thought clung to her mind. She did not want to die unseen. She did not want to vanish without someone hearing her truth. Abigail's lips trembled, and she prayed that some soul, any soul, might pass through this cursed stretch of land and hear her cry. But who would come? And if they came, would they dare to defy the weight of tradition? Would they stand against Boone and the village, or would they walk away, leaving her to the sun's judgment? What would become of her in this land where justice was twisted into ritual? The sun was sinking lower, but it still beat down hot enough to blister the skin. Abigail's voice had faded to nothing more than a broken whisper. She thought no one would come. Then she heard it, the sound of hooves crunching over dry earth, slow, steady. Her eyes barely opened, and through the haze of heat she saw him, a tall figure on horseback, shoulders squared, moving with the slow caution of a man who had walked battlefields and lived to tell of it. Elias Carter, 56 years old, a rancher now, but once a soldier who had carried both scars and secrets back from the war. He had chosen silence over company, work over laughter, a quiet ranch over the chaos of towns. But that silence was broken when he saw her, a girl tied to 4 iron stakes, skin raw from rope, lips torn from thirst. She lifted her head just enough to whisper, "Please, I am begging you. Untie it." The words hit him like a bullet to the chest. He could have kept riding. It would have been the safer choice. Everyone in these parts knew better than to cross Silas Boone and his strange law, but Elias was not made to look away from suffering, not after the things he had seen, not after the family he once lost because men turned their backs. He slid down from his horse. The dry ground cracked under his boots. He knelt beside Abigail, his shadow falling across her burned skin. Her eyes searched his, wide with terror and hope all at once. "You are not guilty," "Are you?" he muttered. "No," she rasped, her voice barely more than breath. "I swear on my life, I am not." Elias pulled a knife from his belt and cut the ropes binding her wrists. The cord snapped loose, leaving raw, red marks on her skin. Her hands trembled as if she could not believe she was free. Then he cut the ropes at her ankles and lifted her up with surprising strength for a man his age. She weighed almost nothing in his arms. The desert had already stolen too much from her. He carried her toward his horse. Behind them, unseen, a pair of villagers watched from the ridge, eyes wide with shock. They would run back to Boone soon enough. The rancher had not only broken a law, he had spat in the face of tradition. As Elias set Abigail on the saddle, her voice cracked again. "They will kill you for this." Elias glanced at her, his jaw tight. "Let them try," he said. And with a tug on the reins, the horse started forward, carrying them away from that cursed patch of earth. But neither of them knew what waited just beyond the ridge. Would Boone and his men let them escape so easily, or was this only the beginning of something far more dangerous? Elias had barely guided the horse past the ridge when he heard the shout, "Stop right there, Carter." The words carried sharp across the dry wind. He pulled the reins and turned his head. There stood Silas Boone with 4 men at his back. Boone's long coat flapped in the breeze, his hand resting near the grip of his revolver. Behind him, one man carried a heavy wooden stick, another had a knife gleaming in the sun, and a third gripped a pistol half drawn from its holster. Boone's eyes locked on Elias. "You think you can ride off with her? You just spit on the law of this village, the law of our fathers." Elias spoke low, calm, steady. "That law is not justice, reglas. It is cruelty. And you know she is no thief. You just need someone to blame." Boone's lips curled into a grin that held no humor. His men spread out to block the trail. Abigail clutched the saddle horn, whispering in fear. "They will kill you." Elias shifted his weight, his hand brushing the handle of his old Colt, though he kept it in the holster. The silence stretched. Then the first man rushed forward, swinging the wooden stick. Elias stepped aside and drove his fist into the man's stomach. The stick clattered to the ground as the man folded over. The second came fast with the knife. Elias caught his wrist, twisted hard, and sent the blade flying into the dirt. A sharp elbow to the jaw dropped him flat. The third raised his pistol. Abigail gasped, but Elias was quicker. He kicked the man's arm. The gun went off with a wild shot into the sky, and Elias slammed him down into the dust. The last man froze, eyes darting to Boone for a signal. Boone did not move. His jaw worked tight, but his hand stayed near his revolver without drawing. He knew better than to push this fight further. Elias had fought wars, and Boone could see it in his eyes. The rancher was not bluffing. Boone spat into the dirt. "This is not finished. Carter, you and the girl will pay, both of you." He turned sharply and motioned his men to follow. The beaten men scrambled up, limping back with their pride as broken as their bodies. Silence fell again. Elias breathed heavy but steady. He climbed onto the horse beside Abigail, who looked at him with both terror and awe. Neither spoke as they rode on, but both knew this was only the beginning. Boone had been humiliated, and men like him never forgot. Now the question hung heavy. Where could they run? And who, if anyone, would dare stand with them? If you are still here with me, thank you. Tap that subscribe button so you will not miss what happens next in this Wild West tale. And while you sip your coffee or tea, tell me, what time is it where you are, and where are you listening from? The town was quiet when Elias guided the horse into the sheriff's yard. Abigail swayed in the saddle, half conscious, and Elias caught her before she fell. Sheriff Thomas Hale stepped out from his office, his hand resting on his belt as he watched them approach. "Elias Carter," he said slowly, "I have not seen you since the war, and now you show up with a girl about ready to collapse. What in God's name happened?" Elias carried Abigail inside and set her on a bench. Boone's name left his lips like a stone. The sheriff's face hardened. "That man has been strutting like a king for too long," Hale muttered. He knelt by Abigail, checked the rope burns on her wrist, and shook his head. "She will need water, food, and rest. But I believe her story. Still, belief is not enough. We will need proof. looked back at Elias. Give me time. I will dig. I will send men to question the traitors. I will check Boone's accounts and his storehouse. If he is dirty, we will find it. Elias nodded. He trusted this man. They had once fought shoulder to shoulder, and though years had hardened them both, that bond remained. The days that followed passed slow but heavy. Abigail stayed in a small room near the sheriff's office. Elias visited often, sometimes bringing her bread or a tin cup of coffee. At first she spoke little, her voice faint from the desert. But slowly she began to open up. She told him about her parents, about the farm she once tended, about how everything was lost when Boone's men accused her. Elias listened, his weathered face softening in the candlelight. She asked him about the war. He gave no glory, only quiet stories of nights too long and mornings too bitter. They shared silences too, silences that carried more weight than words. One evening, Abigail looked at him, her eyes steady for the first time. You could have left me there. Why did you not? Elias studied her for a long moment. Finally he answered, because no one should die like that, and because I have lost enough already. She reached across the table, her hand brushing his. For a moment, the rancher who had hidden from the world felt something stir again. But outside the walls of that room, danger brewed. Boone's men moved through taverns and alleys, whispering threats. Sheriff Hale returned with reports that pointed to missing shipments, accounts that did not add up, and traders who spoke of Boone's shadow deals. It was only the beginning, but it was enough to know the storm was coming. Elias stood at the window one night, watching the street lamps flicker in the dark. Abigail's voice broke the silence. Do you think we will ever be free of this? Elias, he turned, his face lined with both fear and hope. I do not know, he said, and the question hung heavy in the air. Would the sheriff's investigation be enough to bring Boone down? Or would Boone strike first before the truth could ever see the light? The sheriff's investigation moved faster than Boone expected. For days, Sheriff Hale sent men to question traders and comb through dusty ledgers. Piece by piece, the truth began to form. Traders spoke, records surfaced, gold shipments that should have reached nearby towns had vanished without a trace, and all of it pointed back to one man, Silas Boone. Sheriff Hale rode into the village with Elias and Abigail at his side. The townsfolk gathered, their faces tense as Hale laid out the evidence. Boone shouted, cursed, called it lies, but the weight of proof was heavy, and for the first time, the people looked at him not with fear, but with rage. They had feared him for years, but with the sheriff's proof in hand, their fear turned to fury. Elias watched in silence as voices rose. The same villagers who had once left Abigail in the sun now turned on the man who had condemned her. They dragged Boone to the very place where Abigail had suffered. 4 iron stakes waited in the dust, ropes ready. The villagers spoke as one. If the sun is our judge, let it judge you, Boone. His protests fell flat, swallowed by the same law he had forced on others. Boone was bound to the ground, staring up at the same merciless sky he had trusted to punish the weak. Abigail stood behind Elias, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. It is cruel, she whispered. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. Yes, he said, but sometimes a cruel law swallows the man who made it, and maybe that is justice enough. The crowd turned away, leaving Boone to face the burning sun alone. And so the old law that once condemned the innocent now became the end of the guilty. As the dust settled, Sheriff Hale looked at Elias and Abby. You are free now, both of you. But freedom in this land always comes with a price. Do not forget that. They rode out of the village together. The sun was falling, painting the horizon in fire and gold. Abigail glanced at Elias. Her voice was soft but steady. Thank you. You gave me back more than my life. You gave me hope. For the first time in many years, Elias allowed himself a small smile. Hope was something he thought he had lost forever. And now it was alive again, right beside him. So what do we take from this story? Maybe that justice, though slow, will always find its way. Maybe that one person's courage can break chains that others are too afraid to touch. And maybe, just maybe, love can grow even in the harshest deserts. If you have felt the power of this tale, please give this video a like. And do not forget to subscribe so you can ride with me into the next Wild West story. Now let me ask you, if you had been there that day, would you have dared to cut the ropes? Would you have stood against the village and their law? And do you believe cruel tradition should ever decide who lives and who dies? Tell me in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. See,